I never thought I'd be the person posting in a place like this, but after my mom stood in my living room screaming that I was heartless and selfish, I needed to get this out. It was 2 days after I'd come home from a 12-hour shift to find my unemployed younger sister fully moved into my house. Suitcases in the guest room, her makeup scattered across my bathroom counter, her takeout containers already piling up in my sink. Mom had let herself in with a spare key I'd given her years ago for emergencies only. No heads up, no discussion, just done. That evening, Mom had called a family meeting in my own house. She, my sister Emily, and my Aunt Linda, who's basically Mom's flying monkey, were all sitting on my couch like they own the place. I walked in, still in my scrubs, keys dangling from my hand, and the smell of Emily's cheap perfume hit me before I even saw the boxes stacked in the hallway. Mom didn't waste time. "You're being ridiculous," she said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Emily needs a place to stay, and you have the room. You've always been so selfish with your little house." Emily nodded along, arms crossed, smirking just enough to make my stomach twist. Aunt Linda chimed in with her usual, "Family helps families, sweetie. What would people think if you kicked your own sister out?" The room went dead quiet after that. No one defended me, not even a hesitant, "Maybe we should ask her first." Just silence buzzing in my ears, thick and heavy, like everyone was waiting for me to fold. My chest tightened until I could feel my pulse in my throat. I know how this sounds, dramatic, cold, whatever. But hear me out. At that moment, something clicked. Not anger, exactly. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I'd spent years being the reliable one, the one who paid for things, who showed up, who gave second and third and 10th chances. And now they were accusing me, the one who'd bought this house with every overtime shift I could grab, of being the selfish one. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet. Let it go. Kept the peace, like always. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Mom looked so sure of herself, sitting there with that triumphant little tilt to her chin, like she'd already won. Emily was already scrolling on her phone, probably looking for curtains or something. They really thought they could just take over my space, my life, and I'd roll over, because family. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I didn't know then that I had all the ammunition I needed, quietly collected over years of their boundary stomping, ready and waiting. I just knew, standing there with my keys cutting into my palm, that this time I wasn't backing down. I stood there in my own living room, keys still digging into my palm, just taking it all in for a second. The late afternoon light was slanting through the blinds, catching dust motes in the air like tiny spotlights on the chaos. Emily's duffel bag was half open by the coffee table, spilling out clothes that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and that vanilla body spray she's worn since high school. Mom sat ramrod straight on the couch, ankles crossed, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a church service to start. Aunt Linda had already kicked off her shoes and tucked her feet under her, claiming space like this was her house too. The faint clink of Mom's bracelets every time she gestured felt louder than it should have, like the room itself was holding its breath. From the outside, we looked like the perfect little family. Christmas cards every year, coordinated outfits, big smiles in front of the tree. Mom posting throwback photos on Facebook with captions like, "So blessed with my girls," and a string of heart emojis. People at church or my work functions would say things like, "Your mom is so sweet, always asking about us," or "You and your sister are so close." I'd smile and nod because that's what you do. We had the big holiday dinners, the group texts planning birthdays, the surface polished to a high shine. But if you grew up inside those walls, you knew the truth. The air in our family home always felt conditional, like it could turn on you any second depending on Mom's mood. She was the emotional thermostat of the entire house. If she was warm, laughing, telling stories, baking cookies, everyone relaxed, shoulders dropping, conversations flowing. If she went cold, the temperature plummeted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Dad would suddenly find something fascinating on his phone. Emily would disappear to her room. And me? I'd start scanning for what I'd done wrong, even when I hadn't. My name's Sarah. I'm 32, a nurse manager at a busy hospital downtown. At work, I run a whole floor, handle staffing crises, mediate conflicts, make decisions that literally keep people alive. People rely on me, respect me, come to me when things go sideways. At home, though, I'm still the family fix-it girl, the responsible one, the scapegoat when things don't go perfectly. Mom, Diane, though no one dares call her that, is the classic controller. She never raises her voice much, but she doesn't have to. Her weapons are silence, disappointment, and selective memory. She can erase entire conversations if they don't suit her narrative. I never said that, delivered with wide, innocent eyes. Or the slow headshake that says you've disappointed her beyond words. She's never wrong. Ever. If something goes badly, it's because someone forced her hand, or misunderstood her, or didn't appreciate her enough. She's always the victim in her own retelling. Dad, Mike, is the enabler through and through. Don't upset your mother was basically his parenting motto. He'd see the unfairness, catch my eye for half a second with something like sympathy, then look away and pretend he hadn't. He chose peace, at any cost, over justice every single time. Easier to smooth things over, change the subject, offer to grill steaks like nothing happened. He loved us, I know that, but his love came with a side of avoidance. Then there's Emily, 28, the golden child. She's always been the one who could do no wrong. Skipped college? She's finding herself. Crashed 3 cars by 21? Insurance will cover it. Moved back home at 24, then 26, then again at 28 after her latest breakup? Of course she can stay. Poor thing's been through so much. Emily's taken more financial help from our parents than I can even tally. Down payments on apartments she later abandoned, bailed out credit cards, phone bills, you name it. And gratitude? Minimal. She'd roll her eyes if I ever brought up responsibility, like the word was a personal attack. Aunt Linda isn't even blood. She's Mom's best friend since high school, but she's been the chief flying monkey for decades. Always ready with a, well, your mom's just worried about you. Or, you know she only wants what's best. She loves stirring the pot just enough to keep Mom's version of events dominant, then retreats with I hate conflict. And me? I was the reliable one. The one who got straight A's without fanfare, paid her own way through nursing school, bought the modest 3-bedroom house at 27 with a down payment I saved for years while living in a studio the size of a closet. I was the one who showed up for every holiday, who sent birthday checks to nieces and nephews, who drove Mom to appointments when Dad was too tired. Strong women carry the family, Mom always said. I didn't realize until much later that she meant only me. Emily got to be fragile. I had to be unbreakable. If you grew up as the family scapegoat, the one who could succeed wildly and still somehow be difficult for having boundaries, you know exactly what I mean. Every achievement got a backhanded compliment. A promotion? That's wonderful, honey, but don't work too hard. You'll burn out and end up alone. Meanwhile, Emily sleeping until noon was self-care. I'd spent years on an info diet with them, carefully limiting what I shared. I never told them how much my house was worth, or how much I had in savings, or that I'd quietly paid off my student loans early. I'd learned the hard way that any sign of stability just became an invitation for them to lean harder. Looking back, I see the patterns so clearly now. Every time Emily hit rock bottom, which was often, Mom would swoop in, rearrange everyone's lives to accommodate her, and I'd be expected to pitch in without complaint. I'd done it before. Let Emily crash on my couch for just a few weeks that turned into months, covered shifts so Mom could babysit Emily's drama, lent money I knew I'd never see again. But this time felt different. This time they hadn't asked. They'd just taken. If I'd known what they were planning that day, the full extent of how far Mom was willing to push, I would have acted sooner. Changed the locks months ago. Cut the spare key access the first time Emily forgot to pay me back. But I didn't know yet. I still thought there were lines they wouldn't cross. I was wrong about that too. My mother always said, family sticks together, no matter what. We take care of our own. I didn't realize it only applied to me. To everyone else, it meant receiving without reciprocating. For me, It was a one-sided vow I'd internalized since I was old enough to understand guilt. The sacrifices started small, or at least they felt small at the time. But they built up, layer by layer, until they were the foundation of my life. I kept records. Not because I planned this. Just habit. Nursing taught me that document everything because you never know when you'll need to prove what happened. Receipts in a folder on my laptop, emails backed up, bank statements highlighted. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation for a world that didn't always play fair. The first big one came when Emily was 22. She'd gotten into a mess with her first real job. Well, her attempt at one. She was working as a barista, but decided to borrow from the register to cover a weekend trip with friends. It wasn't much at first, but it snowballed, and when the manager caught on, she was facing theft charges. Not felony level, but enough to need a lawyer and restitution. Mom called me at 2 a.m., her voice tight with that familiar mix of panic and accusation. Emily's in trouble. You have to help. She's your sister. I wired $3,200 the next morning. $1, $800 for the lawyer's retainer, $1,200 for what she'd taken, plus fees. I worked extra shifts for 2 months to cover it, skipping my own weekend plans, eating ramen while charting patients until my eyes blurred. Emily got probation, community service. Did she thank me? Not really. A quick text. THXS, you are the best. Mom patted my hand at the next family dinner and said, "See? That's what family does." But the next time Emily needed something, a $500 deposit for an apartment, she didn't call me directly. Mom did, framing it as just this once. And when I brought up the lawyer's money years later, during one of our rare arguments, Emily shrugged. "We never asked you to. You offered." As if I'd had a choice. That set the pattern. Emily's crises became my responsibility. Another time, at 25, she racked up $4,700 in credit card debt from online shopping sprees during a bad breakup. Mom again. She's depressed, Sarah. You wouldn't understand. You're so put together. I paid it off in installments, $500 a month for nearly a year, while she healed by traveling on what was left of her savings. No repayment plan, no interest from her. Just expectation that I'd handle it because I could. If you've ever had the family bank account, you understand. The withdrawals are endless, but deposits? Those are for other people. Then there were my parents' sacrifices, or rather, mine for them. Dad retired early at 58 after a back injury from his factory job, and their pensions weren't enough for the lifestyle they'd grown used to. The house they owned, a cozy split level in the suburbs where we grew up, needed constant upkeep. Roof leaks, furnace replacements, property taxes that crept up every year. I started covering bits and pieces around 5 years ago. Quiet auto pays they pretended not to know about but never refused. It began with the property taxes, $2,800 annually that I added to my budget like it was nothing. Then the home insurance, another $1,200 a year. When the roof needed replacing after a bad storm, that was $7,500 out of pocket because their deductible was sky high. I handled it, coordinating contractors while juggling my shifts. Over 4 years, I tallied it up once, $28 for $100 in total, not counting the smaller things like plumbing fixes, $900, or the new water heater, $1,100. They knew, of course. Mom would say things like, "Oh, the bill came, but it's taken care of, must be a mistake," with a wink that wasn't really a wink. Dad would mumble, "Appreciate it, kid," and change the subject to sports. But the big one was the cabin. Our family had this little vacation spot up north, a 2-bedroom on a lake, bought by my grandparents decades ago. It was falling apart by the time I was in my 20s, rotting deck, outdated electrical, constant mold issues from the humidity. Mom loved it, calling it our legacy. When they couldn't afford the renos, I stepped in. $42,000 over 2 years, new foundation, kitchen gut, septic system. I refinanced my own mortgage to free up the cash, adding $180 to my monthly payments. They transferred the deed to me partially for tax reasons, Mom said. I owned 60%, then 40%, but I paid 100% of the upkeep. It was supposed to be an investment, a place for all of us. In reality, Emily used it for parties, Mom for her book club weekends, and I got the cleaning bills. Years ago, my lawyer insisted on adding a reversion clause to the property transfer. Just in case, she said, tapping the papers with her pen. If they default on any shared obligations, ownership reverts fully to you. I thought she was being paranoid. Family wouldn't screw me over like that. Turns out she was being prophetic. The third layer was the extended family, the next generation stuff that made me feel like I was paying forward for sins I didn't commit. Emily had a kid young. My nephew, Tyler, now 6. Cute kid, but Emily's parenting was sporadic. When he needed preschool tuition because her job didn't cover daycare, guess who got the call? $4,200 for the year, plus uniforms and supplies. Then there was Aunt Linda's hip surgery last year. Mom volunteered me to cover the copay $1,600 because you're good with money. Family emergencies always landed on my doorstep first. Uncle Bob's car breakdown, $800 loan never repaid, cousin's wedding fund shortfall, $500 gift that felt mandatory. I was always the first call when things went wrong, but never the first invite when they went right. Birthdays? I'd hear about them after and see photos on social media. Holidays? I'd plan, cook, clean, and Emily would swoop in for dessert. Tyler's school events? I'd drive 2 hours to attend, while Mom and Emily forgot to mention them until the last minute. It took me too long to see the one-way street. I wanted belonging, a family that valued me beyond what I could provide. What I got was an obligation wrapped in compliments. You're so capable, Sarah. We couldn't do it without you. Translation: keep giving or you're out. I did it to prove I belonged. The evidence always pointed the other way. Every unpaid bill, every ignored thank you, every time they sided with Emily because she was the sensitive one. But those records? That paperwork would become the most important thing I owned. I didn't know it yet, standing in my living room with the invasion unfolding, but the tally was about to tip. All those hidden sacrifices weren't just weights I'd carried. They were leverage I'd unknowingly built. I don't remember how the conversation shifted from accusations to dinner plans, but somehow it did. Mom started talking about what to order for takeout, like the air hadn't just been poisoned. Aunt Linda pulled up a menu on her phone, chattering about extra egg rolls. Emily stretched out on the couch, feet propped on my coffee table, scrolling TikTok with the volume up just loud enough to be annoying. They were all pretending nothing had happened, that the invasion of my home was settled, that I'd accepted my role as the selfish one who needed to fall in line. I sat there on the arm of the chair, still in my scrubs, the fabric stiff from dried sweat after my shift. My keys were on the side table now, within Mom's reach. She kept glancing at them, a small satisfied curve to her mouth, like she'd already won. Then the pile-on started, casual and coordinated, the way it always was. Dad didn't say much, he never did in these moments. He just stared at his plate of untouched crackers and cheese someone had put out, picking at the edge of a sleeve with his thumbnail. That silence was its own contribution. Agreement by absence. Emily spoke first, voice light, almost teasing. Mom's right, you know. You've been kind of distant lately. Barely answering texts, skipping Sunday dinners. We were worried you were mad at us, or something. She said it with a little laugh, like it was absurd I'd have a reason. The smirk tugging at her lips said she knew exactly why I'd pulled back. Aunt Linda jumped in smoothly. If you're struggling with the house payments or whatever, honey, just say so. No shame in asking for help. We're family. Struggling. As if I hadn't bought this place outright with cash savings and a modest mortgage I could pay off early if I wanted. As if she didn't know I was the one keeping their lights on half the time. The smirk spread to her eyes now. She was enjoying this. Mom waited, letting it build. She always saved the final blow for herself. When the room quieted again, she set her teacup down with a soft clink and looked straight at me. She said it slowly, deliberately, like she wanted each word to carve into me. It's time you stopped relying on this family and grew up. Relying on this family. The words hung there, absurd and inverted. I felt them land one by one, relying, this family, like stones dropped into still water. My lungs tightened, a slow compression rather than a gasp. Heat prickled behind my eyes, but no tears came. Just pressure. The worst part wasn't what she said. It was the silence after. Agreement. From everyone. No one flinched. No one corrected her. Dad kept picking at that cracker. Emily's smirk deepened. Aunt Linda gave a little nod, like Mom had just spoken an obvious truth. At that moment, they thought they'd won. I could see it in the way Mom's shoulders relaxed, the way Emily swung her legs off the table and reached for the remote. Victory. The scapegoat had been put in her place. The house was theirs now, the boundaries erased, the golden child installed. They were already moving on to what show to watch. Something shifted inside me. Not snapped. Snap implies chaos, breakage, noise. This was clarity settling like a key turning smoothly into a lock. Click. I stood up quietly. "Excuse me," I said, voice steady. No one really looked up. I walked down the hallway to the bathroom, closed the door with a soft click, and flipped on the light. The mirror showed me someone I almost didn't recognize at first. Face pale under the fluorescent bulb, eyes wide and too bright, hair pulled back in the same messy bun I'd worn to work. But I looked clear, sharp around the edges. I leaned closer, hands gripping the cool porcelain sink until my knuckles blanched. I wasn't being pushed out, I realized. I'd never truly been let in. Not really. All those years of carrying, proving, giving, I'd been standing outside the circle the whole time, handing things in through the gate, thinking if I gave enough they'd open it. They never had. They'd just taken. My breathing slowed. The pressure in my chest eased into something cold and steady. I splashed water on my face, patted it dry with a hand towel that still smelled like the fabric softener I bought in bulk. My hands didn't shake. When I came back out, no one noticed at first. Mom was showing Aunt Linda something on her phone. Emily had claimed the recliner now, legs draped over the arm. I picked up my coat from the hook by the door, slipped it on, grabbed my keys from the side table. The metal felt solid, familiar. Mom glanced up. "Where are you going?"
"Home," I said.
Simple.
"Come."
Emily snorted. "You're home, dummy." I didn't answer. I just opened the door. The cold December air rushed in, sharp against my face, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. My hands were steady as I pulled the door shut behind me. I didn't look back. They hadn't earned even a final glance. I walked to my car, heels clicking on the driveway concrete. The night was quiet except for the low hum of distant traffic. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away without rushing. No tires screeching, no dramatic exit. Just the soft click of the turn signal, the steady glow of headlights on empty streets. My phone buzzed almost immediately, texts lighting up the screen in the cup holder. Mom first. That was rude. Then Emily. Seriously? Aunt Linda. Call your mother. I left them on the table. Turned the radio off. Drove in silence. They didn't understand yet. But they would. What I did next, I did with complete calm. No yelling, no tears, no frantic calls to friends for validation. Just deliberate steps I'd been unconsciously preparing for years. I drove home that night with the windows cracked just enough for the cold air to keep me alert. No music, no podcast, no frantic calls to vent. Just the low hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional click of the heater kicking on. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different, quieter, almost expectant. Like it had been waiting for me to finally decide whose side it was on. I let myself in, flipped on only the kitchen light, and stood there for a minute listening to the familiar creaks settling around me. The faint scent of the lavender candle I'd lit 2 nights ago still lingered. No mess, no strangers' shoes by the door, no takeout containers breeding in the sink. Just mine. For the first time, that felt like enough. No tears came. No angry rant into the void. Just a deep, steady resolve that settled in my bones like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for 32 years. I went upstairs, pulled an old suitcase from the closet, the one I'd used when I moved out of my parents' house for good, and started packing Emily's things. Not everything, not yet. Just the stuff she'd already scattered, like she owned the place. The hoodie draped over my banister, the half-empty shampoo in my shower, the chargers snaking across the guest room floor. Every shirt I folded, every pair of shoes I zipped into a garbage bag felt like a line being drawn in permanent ink. This ends here. I carried it all to the front porch, lined the bags neatly by the door, and locked it behind me. Symbolic, maybe, but symbols matter when you're rewriting the story. Then I made a cup of tea, chamomile, strong, and took it to the office. The room was dark except for the blue glow of my laptop screen when I opened it. I pulled up the folder I'd labeled Family Expenses years ago, the one I'd told myself was just for taxes. Spreadsheets, scanned receipts, bank export files. I'd kept it all. Seeing it in one place was like watching a lifetime spool out into numbers. $28,400 to my parents' house. $42,000 to the cabin renos. $7,900 directly to Emily across 5 separate emergencies. $4,200 for Tyler's preschool. Smaller hits too. $600 here for Mom's dental crown, $1,100 for Dad's new tires, $800 loan. To Aunt Linda that quietly disappeared. The grand total stared back at me, $97,842.67 over 8 years. More than I'd spent on my own house down payment. I know some people will say I should have talked first, sent a group text, given warnings. But I was done talking. Talking had never changed anything except how much more they expected. The tempo shifted then, from calm reflection to decisive action. My fingers moved across the keyboard like they'd been waiting for permission. First, the auto pays for my parents' property taxes and insurance. Click into the county portal. Remove payment methods.
Confirm.
Cancel. Next, the utilities I'd quietly covered when their bills got too high: electric, water, internet bundle. Log in to each account. Delete my card. Cancel. Cancel. The joint credit card I'd added Mom to for emergencies only after Dad's retirement, $8,000 limit. She'd slowly maxed out on shopping and dinners. Reported lost. New card issued to me only. Old one deactivated. Cancel. Emily's phone line, still on my family plan from when she couldn't afford her own. Remove line. Port request denied. Cancel. Even the streaming services they used with my logins, Netflix, Hulu, the one with the kid shows for Tyler. Passwords changed. Accounts locked. Cancel. 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 Each confirmation email pinged into my inbox, like an exhale I'd been holding for decades. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent the evening telling me to stop relying on this family and grow up. So I did. I stopped letting them rely on me. I closed those tabs and opened another folder, the scanned deed for the cabin. There it was, the clause my lawyer had insisted on all those years ago. Simple language, buried on page 7. In the event that either party fails to contribute proportionally to ongoing maintenance, taxes, or insurance for a period exceeding 12 consecutive months, or contests the shared ownership arrangement in any legal capacity, full title shall automatically revert to Sarah Elizabeth Monroe without need for further litigation. They hadn't paid a dime toward the cabin in 4 years.
Not one.
I had receipts proving every tax bill, every repair invoice came from me. If they ever contested the arrangement, like, say, if they suddenly decided the cabin should help house Emily long-term, ownership reverted to me automatically. No court battle. No negotiation. Just done. I sat back in the chair, the room lit only by the screen's fading glow. They thought they held the power, Mom with her key, Emily with her entitlement, all of them with their unified front. They had no idea. I closed the laptop. The house fell into complete darkness, the kind that feels protective instead of empty. I finished my tea, rinsed the mug, and went to bed. Slept better than I had in months. Not revenge. Not yet. Preparation. 3 days passed before my phone finally rang with Mom's name on the screen. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days after I shut it all down, my phone rang while I was midway through a shift report at the hospital. Emily's name flashed on the screen. I stepped into the break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the faint smell of stale coffee grounding me. I answered, voice even. What the hell did you do? No hello. No, are you okay? Just pure, unfiltered entitlement, her words tumbling out like she'd been rehearsing. My phone's cut off, Netflix won't work, and Mom's freaking out because the power bill bounced. You think this is funny? Playing games like some petty kid. I let the silence stretch for a beat, the kind Mom had always wielded like a weapon. Then, calm as still water. You told me to stop relying on the family. So I did. She sputtered, something about overreacting, about family owing each other. I didn't wait for her to finish.
Click.
Hang up. My hands didn't shake as I pocketed the phone and went back to work. The calls kept coming, but I screened them. Voicemails piled up like evidence. Dad's came next, that fake reasonable tone he pulled out for crises. Sarah, honey, call me back. Your mother's upset. The cabin taxes came due, and, well, things aren't adding up. We need to sort this out.
Not a word about me.
Not how are you holding up. Just the money, the assets, the things they'd come to expect as their due. Their worry was all logistics, no love. By day 5, it escalated. A certified letter arrived at my door, the envelope thick and official. I slid it open at the kitchen table, the paper crinkling under my fingers. A formal petition from Mom and Dad, drafted by some budget lawyer Aunt Linda probably knew. They were contesting the cabin's partial ownership, claiming I'd coerced the transfer, that it should be fully theirs as family legacy. They demanded I reinstate the payments, hand over keys to my house for Emily, or face further action. Overreach in black and white. They thought they could bully me back into line. That petition was the match they'd lit themselves. If I'd known what they were planning earlier, I would have acted sooner. But now, they'd handed me the win. I called my lawyer that afternoon, Karen, who'd handled the original deed transfer. I emailed her the petition scan, and we talked while I paced my living room, the late sun casting long shadows across the hardwood I'd refinished myself. They triggered it themselves, she said, her voice crisp over the line. The reversion clause is ironclad. The moment they contested the arrangement in writing, ownership reverts to you automatically. No dispute, no court hearing needed. It's yours 100%. File this with the county recorder, and it's done. I leaned against the window, watching leaves skitter across the lawn. Certainty flooded me, cold and final. Not joy. Joy would have meant I still cared enough to celebrate. Just the quiet click of a door locking behind me. All those open loops, the unpaid debts, the unspoken resentments, the ammunition I'd unknowingly gathered. They closed one by one. The cabin wasn't just a property. It was the symbol of every sacrifice they'd taken for granted. And now it was mine alone. I agreed to meet them. Not at home, mine or theirs. Neutral ground. The old diner downtown. The one with vinyl booths and bottomless coffee we'd gone to as kids after church. Familiar enough to stay grounded. Public enough to prevent scenes. Waitresses who knew us by name, regulars at the counter nursing pie. Witnesses if it came to that. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth with a view of the door. The air smelled of grease and maple syrup, the jukebox playing faint country tunes. My folder sat beside me, thick with printouts, tabs color-coded like patient charts. They filed in 10 minutes late. Mom leading, chin high but eyes darting. Dad trailing, hands in pockets. Emily slouching behind, arms crossed. Aunt Linda bringing up the rear, clutching her purse like a shield. They sat across from me like defendants entering a courtroom, the booth creaking under their weight. The diner hummed around us, clatter of plates, murmur of conversations, the bell jingling as someone left. Mom started, voice pitched low but sharp. This has gone far enough, Sarah. Whatever tantrum you're throwing, end it. Reinstate the payments. Give Emily the key back. We're family. I didn't argue. Didn't jade. Just slid the folder across the table. These aren't legal documents, I said. These are mine. They opened it hesitantly. Pages of bank statements, highlighted transfers, categorized by year and recipient. $97,842.67 total. Broken down. $42,000 for the cabin. $28,400 for their house bills. $7,900 to Emily. $4,200 for Tyler. Every receipt, every wire, every quiet autopay they'd pretended not to notice. Dad flipped through first, his face paling as the numbers added up. "You paid this much?" he muttered, voice rough. "For the roof, the taxes, all of it?" Emily snatched a page, eyes widening at her section. "The lawyer fees, the debts, the phone bills. We never asked for all this." But her smirk was gone, replaced by a flush creeping up her neck. Aunt Linda peered over, lips pursing. "Sarah, honey, no one's denying you helped, but—" Mom cut her off, scanning her own tallies, the medical copays, the insurance. "For all of us?" she said, almost a whisper. The diner noise seemed to fade, eyes from nearby tables glancing our way as voices rose just enough. I leaned forward. "You told me to stop relying on the family and grow up."
"So I did."
"Cancelled it all. And now, you're here demanding more." The air thickened. Mom's hand trembled slightly on the folder. Dad shifted, uncomfortable. Emily muttered something about playing victim. Then I pulled out the deed copy, the clause highlighted in yellow. Placed it on top like the final card in a hand. "The moment you filed that petition contesting the cabin," I said calmly, "you triggered this. The reversion clause. If you ever failed to contribute or challenged the ownership, it reverts to me. Automatically. No court. It's done." Silence crashed down. Their faces, God, the details etched themselves into me. Dad's jaw slackened, eyes dropping to the table like he'd aged 10 years. Emily's flush turned blotchy, mouth opening and closing without sound, the golden child facade crumbling into confusion and fear. Aunt Linda's purse grip tightened until her knuckles whitened, her usual platitudes frozen on her lips. But Mom, her mask finally cracked.
The controlled poise shattered.
Her eyes widened first, pupils dilating in shock, then narrowed in dawning horror. Cheeks drained of color, leaving her looking gaunt under the diner's harsh lights. Her mouth twisted, not in anger but in raw, exposed vulnerability, the victim narrative flipping on her. A tremor ran through her hands as she reread the clause, fingers tracing the words like they might change. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw not the controller, but the controlled, unmasked, small, realizing the web she'd spun had caught her instead. They weren't just shocked. They were unmasked, stripped of the illusions they'd built around my sacrifices. The diner witnesses added to it. A waitress paused mid-pour, coffee pot hovering, an older couple at the next booth glancing over, whispers starting. Public, proportional humiliation. Not my doing, theirs. "You didn't lose it because of me," I said, using their exact words back like a mirror. "You lost it because you tried to take something that wasn't yours. You told me to grow up. Consider this my independence." No one spoke. The bell jingled again, indifferent. I stood, smoothed my coat. I pulled a single dollar from my wallet, crisp, folded, and placed it on the table. "That's all that remains. Everything else I already gave. And you didn't even see it." Mom's voice cracked as I turned. "Sarah, wait." But I didn't. I walked toward the door, steps measured, the folder left behind like a testament. The cold air hit me as I pushed through, sharp and freeing, carrying the scent of impending snow. The door closed behind me with a final jingle, sealing them in with their realizations. I didn't look back. The loops were closed. The ammunition was spent. And for the first time, I felt truly home. The days after the diner passed in a new kind of silence. Not the tense, watchful quiet of waiting for the next demand or guilt trip. Not the heavy hush of being shut out. This was the silence you earn after telling the truth, the kind that settles gently, like fresh snow muffling the world outside your window. I woke up each morning to sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, brighter than I remembered it ever being. The house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled years of held breath. No unfamiliar footsteps on the stairs. No passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. Just the soft hum of the coffee maker and the distant chirp of birds in the bare December trees. My home had always been mine on paper, but now it finally felt like it in my bones. A week later, Karen called to confirm everything was finalized. The cabin deed was recorded in my name alone. The canceled payments were irreversible without my consent, which they no longer had. She paused on the line, her voice careful. We could pursue repayment on some of the larger amounts, Sarah. The paper trail is airtight. Interest, maybe even emotional damage if you wanted to push it. I stood at the kitchen window, watching frost glitter on the grass. No, I said. Justice doesn't need to be loud to be real. This is enough. She didn't argue, just wished me well, and hung up. The only communication from my family came 2 weeks later, an email from Dad. Short, no accusations, no guilt trips. We're figuring things out. Emily got a job at the warehouse downtown. Mom's selling some things online. The cabin's gone, we get that. Hope you're okay. No apology, no invitation back. Just acknowledgement. I read it twice, felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness exactly, but a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd grow from the consequences they'd brought on themselves. Reconciliation wasn't on the table, and I was surprised to realize I didn't need it. No hatred simmered in me either. Just distance, clean and chosen. Some doors close, so you can finally walk through others. One crisp Saturday morning, I drove up to the cabin, my cabin now alone. The gravel road crunched under the tires, familiar and unchanged. I parked, grabbed the thermos of coffee I'd brought, and walked down to the lake. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and frozen earth. I skimmed the edges of the water, thin enough to crack under a boot but strong enough to hold the reflection of bare branches overhead. I sat on the dock I'd paid to rebuild twice, boots dangling over the edge, and let the quiet wrap around me. The wind moved through the trees with a soft rush, like pages turning. I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, though I had, but because I'd finally put down a weight I was never meant to carry. The heaviest chains are the ones we put on ourselves, telling ourselves it's love, it's duty, it's family. I'd worn mine for decades. Now they lay at the bottom of that lake somewhere, rusting peacefully. I hadn't abandoned my family. I'd stopped abandoning myself. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you control. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're invitations for people to meet you with respect, or to stay on the other side if they can't. Some people will only see your worth when you're no longer there to give it away for free. Maybe they'll understand someday. Maybe they won't. I walk forward anyway. I stayed until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold. Then I drove home, windows down, cold air whipping my hair, a small smile I didn't have to force. My life is quieter now, steadier. Finally my own. If this story echoes something in your life, if you've ever been the family fix-it, the bank account, the scapegoat who carried everyone while being told you were the burden, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Did you stay silent too long? Did you finally speak up? How did it feel when you did? And if you've been through something similar, know this. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the moment you stop drowning so others can keep their heads above water at your expense. Subscribe if you want more stories of people who finally said enough, who drew the line, closed the door, and found peace on the other side. Thanks for listening.